TV is pleased right now to be joined by Robert Del Genio, managing member of CDG Group. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Tell us a little bit about your company and what you do.
Okay, our company is a financial advisory firm. We work with troubled and underperforming companies. We'll provide traditional financial advisory work, crisis and interim management, as well as distressed transaction services.
And you are going to be receiving an award from M&A for a deal. Reichhardt, tell us about that.
Yeah, Reichhold Chemical is a company we worked on for about 2 years, and we were able to basically finance it out of Chapter 11, put it in Chapter 11, sold it, and now the company is continuing to grow and prosper. So it was a very successful story.
It was a successful story, but it was a long road, it sounds like. There was a lot involved.
Yes. Originally we got involved, Moelis was representing the company and marketing the company, and we're having very significant discussions with potential buyers. But the problem was that they had 3 primary issues they had to deal with. Significant environmental issues, because Reichhold was an 85-year-old chemical company, had 19 manufacturing plants around the world, operated in Europe, Asia, Latin America, and North America. It really sold products in 85 different countries. Their primary environmental problems were in the U.S. They also had an underfunded pension plan and asbestos liabilities. So it became clear to management and the Moelis team is that the company had to go into a Chapter 11 to be sold and reorganized because these legacy liabilities were too much for any potential acquirer to become comfortable with. So we were brought in to work with them. Originally they wanted us in a CRO role, Chief Restructuring Officer, but we suggested staying as a financial advisor because after conversations with management and their advisors, we saw the possibility of the parent staying out of Chapter 11 and the U.S. operations going in, and the advisors that were already working with the company would represent the parent, and we would represent the U.S. company, which would be the debtor in possession. What ultimately happened was, for about 4 or 5 months before the company filed, we worked to provide some additional financing so that there would be more of a runway so we could file with a stalking horse, so it would be a more streamlined M&A process. We brought in a non-traditional lender, in this case Oaktree, because some of the regulated lenders were only interested in lending against receivables and inventory because they didn't really want to lend against the hard assets because of the environmental issues there. Companies subsequently filed. We conducted a sales process, or a 363 sales process, had a number of parties look at it, had an auction in place, and a private equity firm who saw the value of the U.S. business, even separated from the worldwide operations, bid aggressively against the stalking horse bidder, which was made up of 3 funds. It would be the Black Diamond, JP Morgan Bond Funds, and Third Avenue. The auction was 71 rounds of bidding, and the ultimate price was about 51% higher than what the price was coming into the auction. Ultimately, the bondholders purchased it, and the company was reunited, and it emerged from Chapter 11. But through that, one of the interesting things that happened was some of the structuring we had to do in financing because of the environmental, and then also what we did in terms of the exit. So I can go into that and talk about some of the different nuances that the environmental caused.
Yeah, let's do this, because we really haven't talked about this much in the past, and it seems like with all the industrial companies and mining companies getting into trouble right now, this is going to be a huge issue.
It was, and what you had to do is plan what you thought you could accomplish knowing what these significant liabilities were. So right up front, when we were dealing with the rescue financing, Oaktree was a little more comfortable lending against some of the fixed assets because they were able to do environmental due diligence. Not being a regulated entity, I think it gave them some more flexibility. But then when we actually filed the company and we were looking at a DIP, what we did is structure a kind of a unique DIP. We had a senior DIP that was provided against the receivables and inventory of the U.S. business. And then we had a junior DIP, but there really wasn't enough collateral besides some of the issues that were around environmental to get a junior DIP in the U.S. business. So what the alternative DIP providers, as well as the bondholders, because we talked to multiple parties, decided to do is lend to the foreign operations and then have the foreign operations put a junior DIP back into the U.S. And by doing that, that provided more liquidity into the situation. They didn't do it through the parent because there would be adverse tax consequences. So you were able to take the value from the operations overseas that didn't have some of the legacy liabilities and then use that as collateral to lend to the U.S. business, which allowed us to have a much more robust financing.
Oh, fascinating.
So that's what we did up front. And then the other issue that was significant is all the buyers that were looking at it, there was a plant that served the West Coast in Azusa, California, which is in the San Gabriel Valley. That was part of a Superfund site. And although everyone wanted that plant because you really couldn't serve the Western market unless you had that plant, no one wanted to take over a Superfund liability. So what we and the council and the management and the potential buyer decided is we should negotiate up front with the Department of Justice and the EPA to say, we'd like to buy this, but no one's going to buy this and take on this type of liability. So what we were able to negotiate, and part of this is because Reichel and its management team had been good stewards over the years and had a lot of credibility with these organizations, is an option, a prospective purchase agreement, where the purchaser said, I want an option to buy this business. I'm willing to pay money directly to the EPA, so then because that'll cover some of the environmental liabilities. I think the EPA decided that was better to cut that type of a deal than just to have the plant abandoned or shut down and they would be stuck with these liabilities without any dollars against that. So because of the way environmental law works, if you operate a plant, you're in the chain. So what we decided was they had an option. The EPA and the DOJ were still negotiating. They also had needed to go through a notice period to make sure that no one objected to it. So the buyer's option was put in place as part of the purchase agreement, and then we set up a tolling agreement where the debtor in possession still ran that plant, provided product to the buyer, which the buyer sold to the customers, but the buyer didn't take ownership of it. And then once this got approved by the EPA and the Department of Justice, then they exercised their option, they bought that plant. So it was a way for us to sell the company as a going concern, maintain a very valuable asset that we think buyers probably wouldn't have closed on the company without it, and satisfy some of the government regulations by providing some capital that they can do that. So it was one where I think all parties worked constructively and we found a good solution for it.
And congratulations on your award then, too.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much,
That's
Robert,
right.
for talking
Okay,
to us today.
that's great.
Appreciate it.